the Fourth Wall. We're so glad you could join us tonight. And this is Stephan Wolfert. So happy he's here. Thanks for coming back.
Oh, thanks for having me. Come on.
Yeah, for those of you, I'll make a real quick summary for those of you who know Stephan and are excited to be here because you know he's back. And those of you who do not, Stephan has joined us in the past for two amazing productions here. First of all, he joined us for our production, well, Bedlam's production of St. Joan at our theater here, Fourth Wall, which was just a spectacular show. I know a lot of you, it's your favorite piece that you've ever seen. Totally wonderful. Oh, we'll probably have a little bit of, we have some graphics for you. There's Catherine doing her job as a total pro. Yeah, so there's our cast and our publicity poster there. And that was a fantastic production that won Best Visiting Production that year at the Houston Press Awards. So that was a really exciting show. And then we were also lucky enough in that show to get introduced to Stephan's show, CRY HAVOC. We hired him on to do a couple productions during the run, and we loved the show so much that we brought him back the next year to do it in part of our season as for its own run. So that's a little history, and here's Stephan. We're going to catch up and see what he's been doing.
Yeah.
I remember actually before we get to that, but we were doing, you guys were doing St. John, and we were hanging out, and you go, and this guy who we barely know goes, "Hey, I have this one-man show.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I did it a couple times?" And I was like, okay. What? Okay. And then, Stephan, I remember, coming, and honestly, I don't know why this is, but when someone says, "Hey, I have a one-man show," I'm always leary. And I'm sitting in this audience watching you do this play, CRY HAVOC, and it's one of the most moving experiences. Maybe because my expectations were low, but I don't think so.
No.
It was so moving. And then, so you did it twice during the run of St. Joan, and then we brought you back to do it for a couple of weeks, and because we were so taken by the piece. And
and it's had quite a life.
Yeah, it has.
Tell our audience a little bit about CRY HAVOC, how it came to be, how many times you've done it. I don't know.
Yeah, happily. Oh, yeah. Talk about me. I couldn't. CRY HAVOC, well, it had multiple incarnations, but it believe it or not, it actually began as my thesis piece for graduate school. To do a thesis performance. But at that time it was, I came from pretty much right out of the Army into graduate school for acting with no theater background whatsoever. So, but I knew that we had to do a performance piece at the end of 3 years, and I knew I wanted it wrapped around Richard III, which is, as I talked about in the show, is the reason I left the Army. Or, part of the reason, but it was really that profound opening monologue by Richard III saying, I'm all messed up physically and mentally. I'm really good in combat and military life, but there's no place for me in the outside of that. And it introduced me firsthand to the real meaning of catharsis. We read about it a lot. I didn't even know what the hell the term meant in those days, but I had it. I had a physical, psychological, emotional release that I could not control for days. So I left the Army, and eventually we went to grad school, as I mentioned. And this piece was an inverted version of what you ended up seeing. But then I honestly have lost track now. I think about 9 years ago, maybe, Dawn and I were doing end-of-life care for her mother. She had passed. And I had my second major back incident. My first, as I talked about in the show, was paralysis from wrestling. I was a freshman in high school, and I was body slammed and paralyzed. Well, now I'm 40 something, and a disc fragment broke off and tangled in my spinal cord, and I was bedridden again. And we were doing, at that time, Dawn and I had the Veterans Center for the Performing Arts. I was doing Shakespeare with veterans, had been for years. It was helping me, it was helping the veterans. I was learning a lot from the Native American Theater Company, known as Native Voices and Native Earth, respectively. And so I was learning firsthand about theater as medicine. In graduate school and all these other programs, they talk about what's therapeutic, but it's not therapy. But for me, it was therapy. I thought it was a lie to say, oh, it's therapeutic. And I thought it was distancing. For me, it was having real healing, having a profound effect on every part of my being. And when I was bedridden again, I realized when I looked at my to-do board, my board that had all the projects, I realized how much of it was keeping me from focusing on me. how much of it was preventing me from diving more deeply into my own health, preventing me from practicing what I preach. So I erased that board and said, finish CRY HAVOC and put it off Broadway in 3 years. So Dawn and I started writing the thing, working on it, brought in just a handful of people we knew. And when we saw you, it had been to a place to where I'd been, I think, doing it about 2 years. But keep in mind that before that, the way the script developed was, it really was me search. It was me trying to answer the question of what the hell is wrong with me. That was the actual question I began with. I had 25 Shakespeare monologues at performance ready, shall we say, where I worked the hell out of them, deeply put them, they already meant a lot to me. They'd connected to me at some point along the line, to where especially the ones that I viewed differently than my fellow actors who are not veterans, ones that had a really profound effect on me, or spoke better, like Shakespeare does, right? He spoke to what I was feeling, but better than I could possibly ever state it. Yeah. So that's where I began. And I started in front of a live audience without a script, believe it or not. It was me working, talking to the audience, getting real feedback, seeing where they were able to grab onto ideas. And I've been doing this for quite a while already with the Veterans Center for the Performing Arts. So answering questions and letting it flow into the Shakespeare. And after about 2 years, found that it really found its form that you ended up seeing. And it was meant to serve a lot of, after the me search part of it, the other components that came out in it were veterans sharing their stories and helping me really dial it in more, so that my story represented also more broadly what veterans go through. In particular, the transition from military service from military service into civilian life, and really highlighting the premise of how in the military we are wired for war, but afterwards we are not unwired from war. We're not rewired for society. And that had been thematic for us as an organization already anyway. So the show really dialed it in, but it was so deeply personal at that point that was moving people that weren't veterans, but were experiencing things that I went through, like being raised by an alcoholic parent, or being abused as I was. Now, I don't talk about the sexual abuse by a neighbor in the show, but here's how fantastic theater is as medicine. I had people coming up to me afterwards saying they gleaned from the show that I was molested, because they had been and grabbed onto certain components of it, or were like,
wow,
I think, did you mean that? I'm like, I did. Well perceived, really blowing my mind with every audience. And then on top of it, for family of veterans or friends of veterans, people who work with veterans, who ask us a lot of questions. And I wanted to answer some of those questions in the play without it being too didactic. And then it had its whole other life. So in the production thing, as you said, I've now, we've performed in over half the United States, well over half. We've performed it somewhere between 500 and 700 times at this point. I don't remember the exact, and in 5 of the countries, in all over the US, including Alaska and Hawaii, Canada, multiple parts of Canada, Australia. We were in Melbourne, Sydney, and Brisbane, also in the UK, in the Netherlands, and multiple parts of Italy, Rome, Fabrizio, Calabria, and a few other, Sardinia. So we've been lucky enough to go all over, because this problem isn't unique to the U.S., nor is the trauma unique to veterans. So that's the way I'll kind of attempt to wrap that up if I can.
No, I think it's great. And I think you're right. And you said a lot of things that are really important. What's important about the piece, and why I think it's so important for people to see it, is it doesn't just, as much as it focuses on the veteran, it focuses on giving the story of what PTSD does and how that is ingrained in someone through their experience and being wired for war and not brought back to civilization in a way that they can function. It really does focus on it. But it inadvertently speaks so much to the people who live with people with PTSD, who finally find some relief in feeling like they are not crazy.
Right. Yes.
That's what I remember people sitting in the audience going, "Oh my God, thank you. That is my husband."
Yeah.
My dad,
And my dad and
grandpa.
I remember there was a woman, or was it a gentleman who was a photographer that had been in Iran that was in the audience one night and
Iraq,
Iraq,
Yeah.
and Iraq, and was
Okay.
crying because
Yeah.
one of his friends was killed, and he was
Yeah.
like, "This is the first time anyone has ever explained something to me that I have suffered, that I understand."
Yes.
It was a really amazing experience, and
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, it just is a beautiful piece.
And we mentioned, you know, I don't know how many of the people watching this will know, but Stephan has been generous enough to let us make a film version of this play available to our audience. It's coming up. There it is.
There it is. Yes.
Catherine is on the ball.
Lovely.
Right, so
well done.
So in cooperation with Stephan and DE-CRUIT, we're going to open this up to our audience base through September 20th to starting tomorrow. So as we keep moving through the show, you guys, in the chat bar, there's some information about how it's going to be streaming, but it'll be available to our audiences only. So if you are not on our email list, you need to sign up, because that's how you're going to get the information to get in. So I had to plug that real quick, but we'll hit it at the end.
Part of the show, when I've seen it every time, has been a talk with the audience afterwards. And I haven't seen this video yet. Is that included in the video?
It's not, and nor is the dance. For anyone who watches it, I know. It was. I'll mention a little bit about it, because I think this is to show the power of. I don't care. I'm going to say it, the power of what we do with theater, and I mean the audience as well, because obviously we know now this time has taught us what a vacuum it is without an audience, right?
Yeah.
You know, I've done some brilliant performances in my living room, according to me.
But I don't want to put it on TV.
but no one else would know. Yeah. So, but besides the show being shaped and informed by audience, the other thing that has happened is there was a Vietnam veteran by the name of Tom Mooney, served in Vietnam, became, believe it or not, after Vietnam, became a rock star, then produced rock, and then went into into film, and specifically filming commercials and whatnot. So he came to the show, was really moved, brought his son, who had served in Afghanistan. They had never talked about their combat experiences, didn't know how, didn't have any vehicle, and just went with this silence about their experiences. This is them telling me this.
Yeah.
And then he brought his son to the show, to CRY HAVOC. I'd performed it at, I think it was NYU for that performance, but he came to it. We had the talk back, as you talked about afterwards, and then they mentioned this. They shared it and said, "We've never talked." So I gave them my phone number and said, "Hey, you know, I take this very seriously. If I conjure up stuff in you at 3 a.m., if you're up because of my show, that's my responsibility. I'm up. Give me a call." So they texted me at about 1 and said, we're talking for the first time ever. Thank you. And then there's a text at about 3 a.m. We're still talking. Fuck you. and then in the morning, and I went to sleep. I'm like, "Are you okay?" And then in the morning, I have like 3 more texts, like, "We're still going, and we want to film this," because they had their own production company.
Yeah.
So along with some benefactors out of Cambridge and a few other folks, we were able to film this. So this was filmed by veterans as well, funded by veterans, to be able to be out there for anyone that needs to see this thing. So I think that backstory of the film itself, again, shows this community that we create in theater, and that you in particular are creating there.
Well, we're just so lucky that we find people like you. I mean, it's a crazy thing how we find you, and then we found, you know, Eric and Bedlam and Kate and you know, the Coop and all those folks. We've just found so many wonderful people through this community that we stumbled upon with St. Joan, and we just feel really lucky. And we're
you said you're the interrupter, but I'm going to be the interrupter for a moment and say that I would characterize it as you draw these people to you. You two create a place to where we all want to be with you in. You create what theater, all the best parts of theater, you two create. So that's why we're drawn and we're dying to come to play with you, to work with you.
Yay!
That's a testament to you.
That's wonderful. That makes me feel so good. That's
Oh, go on.
Yeah. Well, we want you back, so that's a good one.
Well, we have 3 new shows we're working on, so.
Oh, good. Well, we've said we want you and Dawn down here with us at some point. So
I remember you talking when you were here about this idea you had about weaving some of the Henry VI plays together.
Yeah.
And you did it.
Yeah,
we did it.
We did.
You want to talk about that for a little minute?
I do. I'm going to segue into it. I'm going to talk about DE-CRUIT because that goes hand in hand. So, you know, I was already doing DE-CRUIT. Like I mentioned, I had the Veteran Center for the Performing Arts in Los Angeles, and it kept morphing. And then I worked with Bedlam for a little while there in New York, but I was doing the vet work on the side still. And we got linked up with 𝗕𝗫𝗄𝗂 at NYU, who's a faculty psychologist, as well as a professor at NYU, the Steinhardt School there for Department of Psychology. And Dawn and I had been wanting to study what we do for a very long time, for well over a decade. We tried to get USC to do it, UCLA, multiple other organizations in LA. But then 𝗕𝗫𝗄𝗂 said, I like what you're doing. I think it could be studied. And of course, you know, I'm attracted to it because I'm going, oh, jamming art and science, which should not go together to see what happens. I'm in. So we've studied it. She helped us really formalize what we do and distill it down. You know, we had our plan would be a 4.5-month model where it's a residency where you're truly being rewired. It's based off of successful programs, which later, if you want, I can talk about some of the influences of DE-CRUIT. But what we did is created a program that for about 24 hours, we are able to introduce the techniques in 24 hours spread over however you want, 8 weeks or what have you, it can be. But the idea being teaching you the premises, the principles of how to recover from the symptoms of X, whether it's PTSD, addiction, you name it, but knowing the mechanisms of the brain, her helping us with the science part of it, and then studying the brain before they begin and after, studying their heart rate variability before and after, studying their depression rates, their self-efficacy rates, and the PTSD symptoms. And it was a profound effect after even a 24-hour model. So we've been going around teaching this more along the template of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. What I love about it is I can go to any city, find a meeting, and it's run virtually the same. So we've tried to formalize it. So we've been doing this. We've been going around and around and gathering stories. And our original thought was to create another CRY HAVOC based off of the stories of the vets. But the reality is the pieces, because I should explain what happens is, besides working with the veterans on self-regulation, part of the program is Shakespeare, where I've created an algorithm to where they share what they're feeling. We have writing prompts, a la Jamie Pennebaker, who's from Texas, as a matter of fact, who's a psychiatrist or psychologist. And Jamie Pennebaker gives out very clear guidance on how to write, just to release things. So we use that, and from that, they draw on, I'll give them a list of things they're feeling, thoughts or feelings that are unique to the veteran experience. Guilt over killing, shame over leaving service, very very things that I've distilled over the last, almost 30 years at this point. And I've assigned Shakespeare monologues to each one of those. So instead of me casting them, they're literally drawing their own monologue based on what they're experiencing. And the verse helps keep them in regulation. So even though they're sharing deep personal truths publicly, the verse itself, Shakespeare's verse, by breathing in before each new line, helps them stay in regulation, helps them interrupt their loop of trauma, prevents them from collapsing into a ball and weeping, but enforces them to breathe in and share the next piece of text, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So the Shakespeare itself helps keep them in regulation, and the final class is them inviting people they want to share what they've been keeping in, keep preventing others from hearing. They use that final class as a performance or a presentation. So from this, we've gathered a lot of material, a lot of knowledge, and we were going to put it all into a play. But Dawn and I were already working on 3 adaptations of Shakespeare. And when we showed them in their form to the vets, they were like, that's it. That's already it. I don't need to hear another one of my stories. You got it. And the first one was what we're calling She-Wolf, which was actually titled by not too distant neighbor of yours there in Fort Worth, 𝗕𝗲𝗀𝗍𝗲, there it is. They did the world premiere over in Fort Worth for us, where they funded it. And what Dawn and I did is we took Henry VI, parts 1, 2, and 3, a little bit of Richard III, and very often these plays are done to try and convey the War of the Roses.
Right.
But what we realized very quickly is the War of the Roses is it's all about the man. It's all about who's going to be in charge. But there's this fascinating character that Dawn and I have both been. Oh, I should mention Dawn is my wife. If anyone doesn't.
Right, we know. Yeah, right.
Okay, yeah. I just realized I talk about her because everyone knows her. Everyone's like,
Dawn,
and that was Dawn in the pictures.
We've created essentially the largest female lead in all of Shakespeare by combining his 4 plays. So we did that as a 4-person in Fort Worth. But as you know, trying to tour with 4 actors is logistically impossible. We're already living in a Mercedes Sprinter van converted, and there's 2 of us. So we began rehearsing it as a 2-person to begin touring it around. And what went along with that was Richard III was always meant to be a companion piece. Well, what happened with our working with people in the psychology and psychiatry field is we began really looking at Richard more from an attachment disorder, at the risk of sounding, again, more didactic. But what's nice is to hear scientists say, well, you know, here's what's happening in the brain with that. And here's why that behavior, and we can see the threads so that we can put it on stage for people to go, I do that. I mean, maybe I don't, you know, I didn't murder children, but I, you know, I've thought about it, or I've had these flashes of rage, or, you know what I mean? And we can track it. We're picking up the Richard III in Act 5. So we're not looking at, you know, just another tyrant, because we can see that any day in the news. But what we're looking at instead is, why does this guy make these decisions? What was his life? Well, when we look at it, his mother never wanted him, cursed him from the womb to adulthood, and on the eve of battle curses him. I get it. Anyone who's out there going, yeah, but look what he did. Sure, right, chicken or the egg. What I'm getting at, this is a guy who's making decisions based on his trauma. I completely identified with this guy. Dawn completely identified with She-Wolf, being an outsider, being raised as her and her sister were the only Black kids in her hometown, you know, till she was whatever, 14, 15 years old. She grew up with violent racism, violent sexism. And then she got her teeth into She-Wolf, and she's like, this is my story. And then doing Richard, I was like, this is my story. And we've cut out some of the stuff. It's just following Richard's trauma, his attachment disorder. And then the third piece is, follow me here, is Macbeth. But Macbeth is a 2-person version as well, because there's the 2 of us, and that's what we can do. But we're following the Macbeths through their decisions as well. Keeping this, the 2 lenses we tend to look at all these are, is first from a veteran's lens, and then adding, how can we highlight what trauma does to the brain and body? How can we highlight the role of trauma? You know, it's so heavily stigmatized. We so heavily stigmatize people who continue to make the same mistakes. I mean, how often do we hear things like, for example, someone who's in an abusive relationship but goes back? Why? Well, believe it or not, these 3 plays help us identify why, just using his text. So that's my long-winded pitch on our rep that we're calling vet rep, because it's these 3 plays. Yeah.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's important because it's also a part of your work. It's a part of the whole entire extension of DE-CRUIT and of what you're doing with the psychology behind what you're studying, because I wanted to bring that up too. You know, I follow you. I follow what you do. I read your papers that get published.
Nice.
You have done.
You're the one.
Amazing. I did it. That's what it was like. But no, and I knew about your funding that you got through TCG, and you're really doing some amazing things with how you're marrying a lot of what I think is true too, the psychology behind the art, behind what you can do to people in regards to how you can help people in a much bigger way than just the fact that we know that you know, an eclectic and not eclectic, that what's the word I'm looking for, that a group experience happens in a theater, people's heartbeats start to come together as one, you know, all these things happen. So the idea that trauma can't be healed, or that you can't start to have a psychological kind of cathartic experience in a theater where there's trauma being shown to you that you relate to, it's just silly to not believe that. To actually map it and be able to understand it and to address it directly seems logical to me. But then I'm a Meisner teacher too. So I also understand that I'm reading, you know, what I'm doing is I'm teaching people to read behavior, take it personal, and understand why you have a visceral response to it.
That's it.
Which is a similar kind of thing to what you're talking about, but just not so much from trauma. But I do teach people about why when they can't respond truthfully to things in the moment, it's because you're afraid because of some kind of trauma.
The survival mechanism kicks in.
Yes.
Does not allow me access to what you're asking me to do. Yeah, it's absolutely, theater's one of, again, Yvette Nolan taught me this so deeply and continues to teach me this. Yvette Nolan's she's in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. She's an Indigenous performing artist and writer and just brilliant human as well. And she talks about how theater was one of the original functions of theater was it as medicine, not exclusively, but one of its original, it dates back on every continent to every culture, that one of its origins are serving as medicine, as a healing tool for us. And so we're seeing it, not just performing it, not just observing it, but participating in it, really actively going into. So that's why when Phil, when you're saying the solo show, I know the feeling. Look, I have one. I make my living off of it, and people go, I have a solo show. I'm like, oh, God. It's the initial, of course, almost trained response. But the reality is what we're actually doing is making mini solo shows for each and every participant.
Yeah.
They're taking a personal narrative and segueing seamlessly into Shakespeare, and before and after bookending it with an honest disclosure of what I'm feeling in this moment. My name is Stephan Wolfert. Right now, I'm terrified and I have cotton mouth. To be able to begin to observe the self without judgment, as you were talking about, Kim, with, you know, the why can't I access that? To begin to observe what's in my way, but without judging it, without saying, oh, I'm a bad actor, I'm a bad person. It's just, oh, right. I don't cry because I couldn't, or I got punished, or whatever it is, to begin to understand where that origin is. Because the last thing I'll say on this is that the biggest discovery, I think, of late that we've had, it's years ago now, but was that the vast majority of this trauma is childhood trauma, exacerbated by the military. So I really wanted, you know, I often say I really wanted the Army to be responsible for everything that's, you know, wrong with me. But the reality is I entered with insomnia, likely severe PTS, you know, certainly ADHD, and an addict, and all, and on. Add the alphabet soup there. I probably went in with it, and now the Department of Defense and the VA and Harvard University have all independently done studies to show that by and large, the vast majority of people entering the military service have much higher what's called ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences. So the people entering the military are surviving childhood trauma, then getting wired for war, and then see ya, good luck, take care. You now know how to kill. I wonder how this will go, you know? So that's what we're creating in this country. And we're doing our best to just, in our own small way, to maybe unwire some of that, or offer a container where people can, you know, the questions we ask are, what are you feeling? Where do you feel it? And when do you feel it? And eventually, when is the earliest in your life you remember feeling that? So it is absolutely therapy of sorts.
Totally. One of the things I always tell my students in class when we're doing Meisner and we are doing things like, you know, when I'm saying, do you like or not like something someone's doing? I'm just like, do you like that or not like it? Or do you love them or hate them? Or what do you know, do you not like it? And they don't even want to say that. And I'll say, you know, and because they don't want to provoke a feeling. They don't want to have a feeling in front of someone. And I explain to them immediately, I'll say, let's go back and talk about why you have trauma. You have trauma because of shame. I was like, you have trauma. And I'll say, let's just even give you an example that everyone can relate to. I go, you were shamed from being a very small child, because right when you were a little kid, you could have any feeling you wanted. You could scream, you could cry, you could laugh, you could do anything, and nobody punished you. But there was one day when your mother finally started going, stop that. When you cried, or when you talked too loud, or when you played too loud, you started getting shamed for having emotion. And as a child, you don't understand that. You just know your mommy doesn't like you.
That's right.
and your mommy thinks you're bad.
Yeah.
So now if I'm telling you it's okay to feel something big or instantaneous or spontaneous in front of someone else, you're having a mommy reflex. You're going,
that's right.
No, that's bad.
That's right.
And that's an early trauma of emotion on spontaneous reaction is bad.
It is.
I'm like, no, it's a gift.
It is. It is a gift.
It is
a gift. Yeah. But even that, look at, we were joking about, oh, you have one solo show, but that part of that is trained into us too. It's this idea that we denigrate our own craft. We denigrate our own industry. Because we've been trained to do that, and we reinforce it. And habits are created through, ritual repetition, and reinforcement of that repetition. So if we've done that, then we have to work the other way to say, no, what we do has a little bit of magic in it and has a lot of healing in it. And let's embrace it and acknowledge the power that's in it, and realize that solo shows are an absolute vehicle to healing, that everyone should have a solo show, and that the things that we acquired to survive our childhood are in their own form a superpower. They helped us survive really severe issues. But now, is it helping me as an actor, or whatever craft I choose, as a designer or writer, what have you, and to begin to be able to unpack, can I unpack that in a manner that I could take care of myself to gain even deeper access? Still keep those skills that'll keep me alive, but maybe know when to be able to let them go.
Sure. Yeah. And I have a one-person show too that I did in New York, and people, it's about my alcoholism.
I remember you talking about this. Yes. Yeah.
And I get more people who say things to me about that show than I do anything else I've ever done. And at some point I may rewrite it or revive it or something, I don't know. But I always thought it wasn't very good. But it wasn't whether the writing or the show was good. It was that people were like, you're talking to me about things I recognize. And they may not have been the exact same event, but I know that vulnerability. I know that trauma. I know that emptiness. I know that being alone. I know. And because no other actors involved, I get to see just you.
Yeah.
To see just you, I feel like you're talking to just me.
Right.
I think that happens in a one-person show, that people feel like all of a sudden they're having a personal exchange with you. And they have more access to their own relatability to you.
Right.
And they don't have any intimidation of feeling like they're maybe not getting it, or maybe it's not right because like, no, you're talking to me.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
And leading by example of how to talk openly about the taboo, the things we shouldn't be talking about. Talking openly about, I'm not okay. And that's okay. To not be okay. Instead of getting up, it's not a TED Talk with all the answers. It's theater asking more questions, right? And something I wanted to throw to you, I'm just gonna do it now since we're on here, but because you were talking about the childhood stuff, there's a gentleman by the name of Edward Tronick, out of, I want to say Boston University or Boston College. He'll be so upset. We're lucky enough to also be friends.
Those people all hate when you
I know they do. I know. Yes. He's at Boston. And you can we edit that in later?
He's watching right now.
I know. Well, I was hoping maybe we could edit it in and just do a voiceover. The correct one once you find out. Anyways, Ed is brilliant, and he essentially created a whole new field of psychology with early childhood developmental psychology, specifically the infant mother relationship, father as well, but initially it was an infant mother. And if you go on YouTube and you look at something called still face videos, that's his work. He pioneered this work. It's really difficult to watch, I'll warn you. It's an example of what you're talking about there. The brief of it is that he works with the mothers and has them rehearse it in advance. So they're working with they're playing with their children rather in a setting, a lovely setting. There's toys and everything. And the child has been there multiple times, if I'm not mistaken. So they have a comfort level with it. And he trains the mother to where they get a signal that the child can't see. The mother turns away. There's a reason for this. But when she comes back, she's in still face. She's not angry. There's no emotion. And he works with them so that it's blank. And it's for about 1 minute to 3 minutes. Like I said, it's really difficult to watch because it's deeply upsetting for the child. The child is trying to get the mother to respond, to reconnect, to play again, to come back to life, to connect to her humanity and the child. And this would be more, in psychological terms, a dissociative state is where the mother's at. And then the signal happens, the mother turns away, comes back, and then the child is fine. Now, we know that this is not long-term devastating as long as the mother isn't like this, because it's an exercise. Children are so resilient, they can recover from this very quickly.
Very short.
But it's exemplary of then, what if that is your childhood? What if a mother is dealing with deep, postpartum depression, any kind of depression, addiction, abuse from someone else, and that mother goes away, that's having a long-term developmental effect on the child. So when we share this with the vets, by and large, they're going, they see it and like, oh, that's why. Okay, okay.
We were talking before we went live here, and you said that you're in Syracuse doing a fellowship.
Yep.
Talk about that. I don't know what you're doing.
Thank you for asking. I was lucky enough to get TCG, Theater Communications Group, has a Fox Foundation, not related to it's independent, not the news channel. But the Fox Foundation has a fellowship for actors, and they have two categories of actors. I fall under the distinguished merit. I like their diplomacy and calling it distinguished merit instead of up and coming. But they give, I think it's okay if I say the amount, it's a $25,000 fellowship in partnership with a brick and mortar institution, in this case, Syracuse University, where you have to spend something like 80 or 88 days over the course of 2 years there with them in working in collaboration. And it can be virtually anything you want. But the reason I'm so, besides just getting it, I mean, that kind of support, but the reason I'm so moved by the fellowship is because it is quite literally to provide opportunities so we continue acting. And the number of people that have reached my age that I know that have left the industry is way, way more than are still in it. And Dawn, she bit the bullet for us and went into restaurant management, was a GM of a fancy schmancy restaurant in New York, among other places, just so we could pay the bills, so I could work off Broadway and make my solo show, and then left it and we're back on the road now again. But so this gives an opportunity to actually take voice lessons. I'm here developing one of the 3 plays that I mentioned with complete, the amount of resources we're getting from Syracuse Stage is I'm just not used to it. I don't know. I'm like, here you have a stage management team, you have, these other people that I'm like, I don't know what to do. There's all this support.
I'm going to interrupt something right here.
Yeah.
Because do you hear how amazingly educated, trained, professional, and amazing you are, and you're getting excited because you have a $25,000 grant and resources?
Yeah.
That is wrong.
Yeah.
Okay?
You should be excited about it.
No, you should be excited. No, but you know what I'm talking about.
I do know what you're talking about.
The point is,
you should have a $500,000.
That you should be making $150,000 a year and have a serious salary and be in a show after a show after a show after a show, whether it's directing or acting, because you are so much. You work constantly on your craft. You're constantly putting into to the world.
Giving back.
You're giving back all the time. A lot of people are trained to say, I just work, and I just I'm dying and I'm struggling in between. And but that's culture. That's not an actor's fault. That's the society's fault, that we don't value this profession the way we should.
I agree.
But it's just, you deserve $1 bazillion. What is the hell?
from your,
but I'm very happy
from your lips
that you're
to
not
a patron's ears.
Yes,
I'd like
$1 bazillion.
I'd like to know how you're dealing with, as you're doing this work, how you're dealing with the COVID, COVID.
Yeah. We're dealing. I don't know how to even calibrate it, right? We don't know what to compare it to even. But
I meant physically, in like you're working on a play with a support team.
Yeah.
I'm actually, I know you were probably, what you were going to talk about is probably more interesting.
No,
but I'm curious, like bricks and mortar, like how are you able to do this work now as an equity artist, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, most of most of it remotely, unfortunately.
Okay.
We have a space. Syracuse has been doing better than most. They've had a really, strict policy and have been sticking to it about the rooms, the number of people that can be in rooms. You can't walk without tripping over a sign that says, you must wear a mask and security. And they've been on it, and clean, the face mask and the visor for faculty and staff. They're cleaning everything all the time. I mean, it's really impressive. But that said, we still are doing at least an equal amount of time on Zoom. So we're rehearsing remotely because we have a different director for each one. They're all in different cities, London and New York and what have you. So they've had to be piped in. But luckily, again, Syracuse has, big screen TV there for us, and mics and trained people who just come in. Because look, if I had to hook it up, we'd still be in the room going, what does that mean? But luckily they've got these brilliant young staffers who come in and they put it together. They're like rewiring it and everything. But this
is enough for me.
It's a good chance for us to publicly thank Catherine Dunaway.
Yes.
Who works for us, who's making this all happen for us.
Yes.
Because like you, it would be a disaster without her.
And that's true with, even going back to Kim, what you said about thank you for what you said about me, but I only ever, even like the awards we've gotten, I only ever receive it as our group. I mean, the amount of work that Dawn does, behind the scenes is way more than what I'm doing. Like right now, she's working in the other room on probably 10 projects that I should be helping her with. Our chairman of our board, Jason Cleveland, the Alicia Ali that I mentioned, all these people that work. We have vets and non-vets in different cities setting up DE-CRUIT programs with no funding. Alex Mallory's in Chicago, just went, I want to do this. I believe in it. Robin Ludwig, who's a veteran in Fort Worth. They're just like, it moved them and they went, I want to give back. And even in COVID. And right now, Phil, it's bad. It's so bad that I've never received the volume of requests for help that we have. We're not licensed people, we don't pretend to be. We're your call if you're going to fall through the net. That's what we are, to try and help you with services, or literally, frankly, most of the time it's just to be there and listen. Dawn will be on one phone, I'll be on the other, just to, connect with another human or via Zoom. But we can't keep up. And it took such a toll on both of us that I've had to pull way, 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 way back. I'm when you said, how am I physically? Probably, to be completely honest, probably the worst I've been in a decade. I just can't, I've struggled to even just move. The demands are so great that, we go teach, or especially on Zoom. I'm sure we've all been on Zoom. Zoom fatigue it's real.
It's horrible.
It is real.
Yeah.
And I get done with a 90-minute or 3-hour class, and I have to nap. I have to literally just take a nap, and at best I'll do yoga. But it's hard to not just grab horrible food and jam it in my mouth and then feel worse. It's just, it's a cycle. It's tough. It's really tough.
It's really hard. And you're right. And I know that what you do is so important because people's lives are at stake.
Yeah, they are.
People that have the kind of disorders that you're trying to help them with, they're high suicide risks many times, and they're in very bad shape. And we're just talking about, and I know actors are struggling right now, and designers and directors and all the people involved in theater. We can't work, and we're just struggling. And some people are working in some places, but it's a very different thing what you're doing. You're trying to work as an artist, but you're also trying to support a whole network of people who have trauma.
Yeah.
So God bless you, my friend.
Thank you.
What you do is so important, and I'm very grateful that I know you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that you have to go through this, but you're right. The Zoom thing, that's interesting to me too, because I teach on Zoom, and after 3 hours of teaching, I think I have never been that exhausted in a class.
Right. Dawn and I, we've learned to literally have a change of clothes.
Yeah.
Because we sweat through it. We're working so hard that we'll get up and we'll have to either shower or just switch clothes before we either go to the next class or go to rehearsal here or what have you. And
I think that's a wonderful thing, though, that people should know who are out there about how hard artists and educators and producers and directors work. We're all workaholics, and we want to be in the work. We want to be involved in this kind of stuff. So people who, out there don't have an inkling of like how hard artists work. We create that work. We're always out there. Most of the people I know are out there trying to get art out to the people in some capacity, even during this time. So
I love that you said that, because I'm constant. I know that, you know, we sound like the Oscars when we're like, no, we're promoting artists and we're trying to uplift, but it's because we're so heavily denigrated. I don't think that artists are more special than anyone else, but we're just so used to not being treated as even special.
Right.
You know, the friends, the texts that I have coming in right now, besides veterans, are other actors going, what do you know, how are you handling this? How are you handling that? And feeling lower than ever, because now even our survival jobs are gone.
Right.
And we don't get any assistance, and we often don't qualify even for the unemployment because of the way the system's set up. So it's really,
well, it's like we got a little bit of help for about 3 months, and then it's nothing, and then we don't have day jobs to return to, or if we do, we have to go into really dangerous environments like waitressing or retail, and you know, so that we can be available to come back to the stage. I mean, you could maybe go back into an office and sit in a cubicle and be safer, but then you can't do any art because you're trashed from that. It's really tough for people to understand how hard artists work. And then artists work hard for no money, barely, during good times. Now they're literally working for no money. So I hope people are out there, if the people that are doing okay right now, like donors and people who have a lot of money and have that ability to put, you know, keep theaters alive so that they can come back and those artists can get back on paychecks. Please do, and support DE-CRUIT, support those organizations that help people, because it's important. It's important.
I'm curious. This is a little bit of a change. It's a total change.
Please do.
But so you know, I know because I've watched CRY HAVOC several times that your journey as an actor is an unusual one. That you were in the service and then you found yourself in this production of Richard III watching, and that spoke to you, and then you became an actor. So I don't want to go, you know, there's more to the story, obviously, but I'm curious if there was a person in your life who, like a mentor or someone who their approval said to you, yeah, you can be an actor. And how that happened, who that person was.
There wasn't one, there was many, there were several. I mean, at the time, you know, I went at the time, meaning I was leaving a failed marriage and had a girlfriend who was in theater, and that's the reason I went to the play. As part of it, we were friends. When I say girlfriend, a female friend that we eventually did end up dating was really supportive. And so for me to come from, you know, the blue collar Midwest, I come from the north side of La Crosse, and in the 80s, it was truly, in those days, it was the white collar was on one side of town, blue collar was on the other. We took pride in being the labor force, and you know, a weekend of recreation was, not exaggerated, without hyperbole, drinking and fighting. You know, that was recreation for us. So, you know, I come from this hyper masculinized culture, and suddenly I'm with this lovely, open, free theater person. And it's so attractive to me because it's foreign. I'm just like, what are you? How does this work? You think and feel things and you say them out loud. How does that work? Where did that? So for me, this was part of it. And then there's a woman by the name of Jane Fellows who ran the Whitefish, the theater in Whitefish. I don't want to say the wrong name again. But she literally took me and was like, oh, I'll teach you how to act. I said, can I just watch rehearsals? She goes, yeah, from on stage, get up there, and then cast me, like forced me. I'd never done a play. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I don't know that I still know what the hell I'm doing, but I knew even less then. And helped me prepare for graduate school. And then, look, you talk about mentors, Stephen Berenson and Brian McElhaney at Trinity Repertory Conservatory and Company at that time. They'd created the conservatory. They brought me in. I told them flat out, I said, because when they asked me to audition, I said, do I have to? They said, of course, it's a theater program. I said, yes, but if I could audition well, I wouldn't be going to school. I I don't even know how to audition. And it was, I can only imagine you know what I mean? The torture that I put them through.
That's awesome.
Cared for me. They really took care of me. Then, of course, I was lucky enough to work with the legendary Twyla Tharp for 6 years. I mean, she taught me more about everything than I could ever possibly digest and then regurgitate for others to hear. And then, as I mentioned, the Native American theater companies, Randy Reinhold's at Native Voices and Yvette Nolan at the time at Native Earth, really brought me in and just said, you know, just sit. Stop trying to analyze everything with your head. Just be present. Be here and absorb, rather than try to make meaning of everything, which we're prone to do. They said, just be, just exist. And about 9 years in, I went, I think I'm starting to finally feel what the hell is going on. Not know, but feel it. And continue to strive towards that. And then, of course, Tina Packer at Shakespeare and Company. I was right on the cusp. I have to be honest, I was right on the cusp of going, I think I've had it. I think, you know, I've done this before where I'm like, I can't imagine doing anything other than acting, but I was just on every level, the business, the craft, everything. I was so burnt out. And then Tina Packer made me proud to be an actor again. She really reinstilled me. She said, we have power. We have real power. We have a responsibility. I did the month-long intensive at Shakespeare and Company, and she really, you know, ripped it back into me. I'm like, yeah, I came out and I went, I want to do that for people. And so yeah, they've been, and then I'm not exaggerating, Dawn, continually, Dawn, just whenever I start to get a little burnt, she knows just how to ride the waves. So like when I fall into my slump of depression, she knows not to push me, but then there's a certain point where she's like, yep, and let's work on this. Let's work on this scene or monologue, or will you help me with this, or show me that, and all right. There's my reason for living. I forget about it. So
I like hearing you talk about how, you know, we forget that we have magic, that what we do is healing and magical. I forget that, and hearing you say that tonight really moved me.
Good.
So thanks for that.
Of course.
Will you tell people, you know, you went down this list and all theater, you know, theater, but then in the middle of it you go, and I worked for 6 years with Twyla Tharp, and I remember why. But would you tell our audience how the hell did you work with Twyla Tharp?
Yeah, I worked with her on the Moving Out.
Who is she? Tell our audience who she is.
Twyla Tharp is a legendary choreographer, considered one of the greatest living choreographers. She did hair back in the day and all of that, but when she really came onto the scene, and she was doing things with dance that weren't. One of her first pieces was, I call it starfish pose. I don't know what the hell it actually is, but it was, she was in Reveille. The dancer went up on point and held in an X position for the entirety of a song. And the choreography, you know, those who didn't get it were like, what the hell is this? I'm watching someone. But for her, the choreography was as her muscles, the muscle failure and twitching, watching a body hold and as you talk about what the magic of what we do, the magic of what a dancer does, to hold that position and breathe the breath, right? Because they're wearing just enough to cover up. So you can see this amazing, you know, as Hamlet says, what a piece of work is a man and a woman. Look at this body. Look what it does. And so to just watch that. And so I didn't know who the hell she was. She by the time I worked with her, she was absolutely legendary, multi-Tony Award winning, I think Emmy Award winning, and on and on and on and on. But I didn't know who she was because I came from the Army. A friend of a friend said, hey, do you know who Twyla Tharp is? I said, no. Said, she's considering doing a musical with Billy Joel's music. I was like, oh, I know who he is. He said, he goes, yeah, she has some questions about military stuff. Can you answer her questions? I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, be happy to. What do you charge? I'm like, 150 an hour. And they're like, oh, okay, great. I'm like, oh, all right, awesome. And I'm in grad school at the time. So they paid me to take the bus down to New York. She was late. I was pissed. I didn't know who she was. So I kind of chewed at her a little bit. She loved it. We worked, it was supposed to be 45 minutes. I bet I don't remember anymore, but it was hours and hours and hours. And I'm putting her dancers through this. She's like, show me basic training. And I just tore her dancers out. And her dancers are physical specimens.
Yeah.
They walked in the room and I'm like, oh, I'm so out of my league here. Like one guy's doing handstand push-ups in the middle of the room. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to teach these guys? But she was committed to her dancers looking like actual men at this time, because it's Vietnam War. There were women, but for this particular story, for anyone who doesn't know it, it was men. It followed these men in this journey. And so she wanted them, instead of standing like men in first position, to stand at a position of attention. And I said, this is going to take so long. So she hired me, and I worked with her for, like I said, years. But we worked for over a year on what became Moving Out. And then it went, and it went to La Jolla and Chicago and traveled. So I got to continue to work with it. And then it went on Broadway and ran, and then the national tours. And she kept me very well employed, very well taken care of. And then I knew who she was finally. But she's the one that helped me come up with the term "wired for war," because her dancers, even after weeks and weeks and weeks, I was really frustrated. And because I would catch them off guard and go, fall in, this command that we veterans know and immediately tightens the gut. And this, it's just the pucker factor goes up for anyone who knows that. Like, and when I would do that, they weren't doing it.
Right. They'd be like, okay.
Yeah, and like, and I was getting really frustrated because their column left turns instead of plant turn. We're like sort of this, this flashy, where I kind of came unglued, and I was like, gentlemen, when the military issues fringes on the uniform, then you can turn like this. Until then, keep your head. And I'm like, I'm losing my mind. And we call a break, and I told her how frustrated I was. And she said, you have to understand that these men have been wired to dance since about the age of 5 and 6 and 7.
Right, there you go.
Whereas you've been wired for war. So you're mashing up, you're trying to get them to do your thing, just like you couldn't do. Because when I took dance classes with them, I was like,
you're not standing on toe point.
Yeah, no, I mean, toe point. I couldn't even.
What does that mean?
My toes, period. I'm like, people can do that? What the hell? Yeah. So she really helped me synthesize some of the language that I still use today, which, like I said, the wired for war. She helped me understand that it wasn't a psychiatrist that taught me, it was a dancer who taught me about the central nervous system.
See, there you go.
Well, there you have it. Artist.
Nice.
Stephan,
looks like we've
been talking for an hour. I feel like we could go on for 3 more.
I feel like we've been talking for 10 minutes.
But we're not going to do that to you.
Yeah.
Well,
do you have anything else that we've missed, or that you'd like our audience to know about? Or
as soon as we sign off, I'll remember.
I know, right? Well, I just want to remind everyone.
Boston University!
Right.
And I just want to remind everybody that you get to see CRY HAVOC.
Yeah.
Please take advantage of this period of time where we are going to make it available to you. Stephan's been so kind to collaborate with us and get it out there. So we will, you have to sign up for the Fourth Wall mailing list. There's a link here. It'll be available on the Facebook page, everything else. So get signed up. You'll be able to do it. And Stephan wants to say something. And then it's going to be free. We're just asking if you can make a donation, and we're going to donate to DE-CRUIT and to Fourth Wall through the attendance. Stephan.
Yeah, I did remember something else that he doesn't need the plugs. It's a bestseller, but Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, is a book that if anyone's wondering to learn more about what we're talking about, that book is really the starting place. It's the text. We're lucky enough to call him both a friend and a colleague at this point, but he's even donated books to us to where we give to the veterans to really learn about the science of what we're talking about. So we can learn that it's a function of the brain and not our fault. There's no fault here. It's just a function of survival. So I want to make sure that book, for anyone who's interested more in the work we're doing, that's a great book to begin with.
Well, we adore you, and
I adore you.
In the same room.
We adore you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
this is goodbye. We haven't figured out how we can keep talking. We just have to end the show.
It's okay.
It's a technological problem that we can't figure out.
Very cold to me, but
we're gonna cut you off in a minute.
Just a fade out. or as most of my Zoom classes go, yeah. What are we doing? What's the scene?
good.
Oh, we can also do this where we can like bring you back over here. There.
Yeah. Look at that handsome devil.
Well, we will be in touch. Thank you for everything you do for us.
Oh.
And we're going to get you down here again. So it's only going to be a matter
You're
of
stuck with us.
Take care of yourself.
You as
And
well.
have a great time up at Syracuse.
Thank you. We will.
All right.
Take
We
care.
love you. Take
We
care.
love you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Beyond the Fourth Wall is produced by Fourth Wall Theater Company, Houston's home for extraordinary performances up close. Each guest is paid for their appearance on this series, in accordance with our mission to pay artists a living wage. Follow the links in the video description to support Fourth Wall with a tax-deductible gift, or to subscribe to our upcoming 10th anniversary season.
I'm usually the interrupter. I know that's hard to
That's your superpower.
That's me. I'm the bossy boss superpower interrupter.
Excellent.
All right, here we go. All right, we're going to start and ready? 3, 2, 1.